Good evening and welcome. My name is Marlene Braga, and I am Vice President of Public Programs for the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. Tonight, we're excited to offer to you vital information regarding local, county, and state initiatives that currently appear on the California ballot for the 2022 midterm elections. Leading the conversation this evening will be our partners at the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. We encourage you to please ask questions, those that you believe are necessary for you to feel fully prepared to vote across all initiatives appearing on the ballot for this electoral cycle. At this time, the Skirball is honored to welcome to the virtual stage Dr. Ninoshka McTaggart, Executive Director for the LA League of Women Voters. Dr. McTaggart is a native of Los Angeles and daughter of Jamaican immigrants. She is a sociologist who researches race, gender, and other forms of inequality in society. Before joining the League of Women Voters, she worked as Director of Research and Outreach for the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media. In addition, Dr. McTaggart has worked as a college-level educator and diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. In 2020, she co-authored a book on white privilege entitled White Privilege: The Persistence of Racial Hierarchy in a Culture of Denial. Dr. McTaggart received her BA from the University of Southern California, a Master of Arts from California State University, Los Angeles, and her doctorate from the University of California, Riverside. Dr. McTaggart, welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that introduction. First, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. It's a nonpartisan, not-for-profit political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government and works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Our goal is to keep residents of the Greater Los Angeles area informed about the issues before them, engaged in the democratic process, and empowered to express their voices. No other community-based organization has the scope, depth, and history of service and dedication to ensuring our democracy here in Los Angeles is supported by an informed electorate. And we have provided this service now for over 102 years. The League of Women Voters never supports or opposes any political party or candidates, and we welcome membership from all gender identifications and expressions. I would like to now introduce our speaker for tonight, Mona Field, who serves as the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. Mona Field is a former political science professor at Glendale Community College. She was elected to the LA Community College District to serve as a member of the governing board. Mona has facilitated workshops and panels for the Faculty Association of the California Community Colleges, the Community College League of California, and the California Studies Center. She is a member of the board of the Los Angeles Leadership Academy and is on the board of the foundation of the LA Community College District. Mona is author of the best-selling college textbook, California Government and Politics Today, now in its 15th edition. Take it away, Mona.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say again, a thank you to our partners at Skirball and our good friends who are with us this evening. Thank you to all of you who are making time to tune in and learn something about the ballot measures. Just want to say we're going to have a PowerPoint on screen. We're going to go through the state propositions. There are 7. And the LA County measures, and then we will have a question and answer. I encourage you to use the Q&A function in order to put your questions in, and you may certainly do that at any point during the presentation, but we will answer them after we've covered the propositions. So let's go forward right away with our PowerPoint. Thank you. So first, I do want to say that our league chapter, Greater Los Angeles, we are very pleased to have a robust internship program. And these PowerPoint slides were developed by 2 of our current interns. So let me just begin. Let's go to the next slide. we have, as I said, 7 state propositions. And one thing I want to point out, a lot of people have been asking, well, how come Proposition 1 is there? And then where are the other propositions 2 to 25? Well, the answer is that we start each season of propositions with the number based on the last round. So last time our last one was 25, and we were supposed to start 26, but because Prop 1 was put on the ballot by the legislature, they got to pick the number and they decided they wanted to call it Prop 1. So that explains one little piece of the puzzle. And then if we could go to the next slide. So we have a total of 7. Let me explain. We are not going to go through them in exact order. They're on the ballot, and I will tell you why. We're going to start and cover the ones that are less complicated and easier to understand first, and then we're going to circle back, and I'm sure you can all guess which 2 we're going to circle back to. But let us begin now with the next slide. So Proposition 1, again, put on the ballot by the legislature, and it is a state constitutional amendment. And the way the situation is now, California currently has what we call normally fairly liberal reproductive rights and abortion laws. And of course, the reason that's important is, as everyone knows, the federal Supreme Court not too long ago revoked the Roe versus Wade decision. And in many states, they have already pretty much prohibited abortion or limited it severely. Here in California, we continue to have a law that protects the woman's right to choose. So let's go to the next slide. So basically, Prop 1, it's rather easy to understand. It takes our current laws on reproductive choice and puts them in the state constitution. Very simple. And you might say, well, what's the difference between a law and our constitution? Well, you can pretty much guess that a constitutional amendment makes it a stronger thing than a law. And the reason that's important, of course, is there is some concern that if something were to change in the dynamics in Washington, D.C., that potentially there could be an effort to make abortion illegal in the entire country, rather than the patchwork we have now of each state deciding its own laws. It's to strengthen California's reproductive rights law, make it into our state constitution. Let's look at the next slide. So fairly obviously, the arguments in favor is simply strengthening the right to obtain abortion and contraception. Presumably, this would be a stronger protection if at some point the federal government tried to outlaw abortion and or certain forms of contraceptives. And of course, against, some people say, well, why put it in the Constitution? We already have a law. And argument against could also just include anyone who opposes the right to an abortion, and they simply want to say, I don't want to see it expanded as of right. Let's go to the next slide. And as you will easily guess, the support, at least some of it, coming from Planned Parenthood, LA County Advocacy Project, and a number of other organizations that support the right to have an abortion. And interestingly, while there is opposition, no opposition has raised money that is registering in the record-keeping system of our state Secretary of State. So you can see that this is not what we'd call one of our big money propositions. And again, I think it's pretty clear, I won't repeat it. You know what it means to vote yes, and you know what it means to vote no. And of course, we'll take questions later. Let's go. We're going to, as I said, we're skipping the most complicated, and next we're going to look at Prop 28. We will come back to 26 and 27. So Prop 28 Right now, the state by state constitution mandates that 40% of the general fund each year must go to K-12 and community college public education. But we don't actually carve out a particular piece for arts and music education. And many of you may have had a connection to our public schools at some point and realize that when budget cuts come, often it is art and music that are the first to go. And it's not the best funded of our academic programs. Let's go to the next slide. So Prop 28 is interesting. There is no tax increase. I want to repeat that. There's no tax increase in Prop 28. What it simply says is we will carve out of whatever's in the state fund every year, the annual budget, 1%, and it will be allocated and dedicated to arts funding in K-12 public schools, which of course includes public charter schools. And the use of the funds would be locally determined based on, community needs around arts and music and what fits the community. Let's go to the next slide. And there again, this is no new taxes, but a carve out in the state budget. Let's go to the next one. I already kind of talked about that. So again, on the pro side, this kind of education is really important for individual development. Also, it's a big part of our economy. Here in California, the creative industry or creative sector is a big part of our economic strength. So part of it is to prepare students to work in that part of the economy. And of course, the concern that these are often the first to be cut when there is a budget crunch in education. And then against would be, it doesn't create a new tax or revenue source and potentially could limit funds for other issues that we might want money to go towards. And let's go to the next slide. This gets the interesting part here. So where does this proposition come from? Well, many of you may have heard of Mr. Austin Buettner, been a civic leader in Los Angeles many decades. And for several years, he performed the duties of superintendent of the LA Unified School District. And he, I imagine, was unhappily surprised to find out how badly arts and music education suffers when there's a budget problem. And he is an independently wealthy gentleman. And so he has spent the bulk of the money to gather signatures to put this on the ballot. And by the way, signature gathering in California for a proposition placed by voters and signatures is about $2 million. So there's always somebody with money putting these things on the ballot, whatever the issue is. Anyway, he's done a lot of the heavy lifting financially. And here's an example. Not only is there no money raised, but when you look at your sample ballot from the state of California, I hope you all have this big, thick booklet that can be quite intimidating. When you look at the argument for Prop 28, there it is, Austin Buettner and PTA and California teachers. But on the opposite page, which is page 31, no argument against Proposition 28 was submitted. Now, I want you all to know this is very rare for California. Nobody in the whole state wrote an argument against this proposition, and that is extremely unusual. So again, if you want to vote yes, you want to carve out 1% of whatever's in the state budget for arts education, public schools. If you vote no, you do not want that carve out in our state budget. Let's go on. Prop 29. Now, when you start seeing commercials, kidney dialysis patient A, please vote yes, it is important for my health. And then you see kidney dialysis patient B, please vote no for my health. And you're thinking, I've been here before. Why is this so familiar? Well, it's because twice in the last two elections, a virtually identical proposition has been placed before voters, and California voters have rejected it twice. And you might say, well, why is it back again? Well, we're going to explore that. And by the way, there is no limit on how many times a organization or individual who has about $2 million for starters can put something on the ballot. So it's not like if we vote no 3 times, it's over. It could come back. We'll see how people vote. And again, dialysis is a very critical form of medical care. Most of it is performed in clinics, and in California, and probably most other states, most of those clinics are owned by one of 2 for-profit companies, DaVita or Fresenius. Let's look at the next slide. So Prop 29, very much like the 2 previous propositions put on the ballot by the same interest group, would require clinics to have either an MD, a nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site during all procedures. Right now, just for clarity, technicians are running the dialysis. And while a doctor does show up at least once a week and check on everything, there's not a doctor on duty at all times. And then there's a few other components about the clinics and their obligations to report on their, services of reducing service or closing. It has a clause about discrimination, but the nuance, the core is whether or not a higher level medical provider, an MD, NP, or PA, must be present at all times. That's kind of the crux of it. Let's look at our next slide. So obviously, to pay a doctor to be there however many hours a week they're doing the procedure will increase the cost. This could therefore impact insurance and copays, Medicare, Medi-Cal, all the publicly funded programs. And in theory, again, this is not a fact, this is a potential. Some of the clinics may say, we aren't making enough profit if we have to pay doctors and we're going to shut down. That's where you see the commercials for no, is somebody, probably a patient, saying, I'm afraid my clinic will close, please vote no. That's, but again, the yes and no, all you're going to see are patients in commercials. And we're going to start looking in a minute at where the money is and who's really proposing it and who's against it in terms of the money that is paying for all those commercials. Let's look at our next slide. So here again, on the pro, it does ensure, now it says proper medical staff. That's a question of judgment. It ensures that higher trained medical staff will be there at all times. That would theoretically protect patients and promote equitable. Those are kind of the pro arguments. Now, remember, the arguments you see in that booklet, which much of this is taken from, those are not fact-checked. Those are arguments by those who support or oppose every proposition. So we're just kind of reporting to you on how they present their arguments. We are not saying these are factual. And against, again, the clinics somewhat have threatened to close if they don't make enough profit, which would be obviously very frightening for patients where that could happen. There's a sort of an argument that the higher level medical professionals actually won't have that much to do at the clinics, and they would end up kind of sitting around or doing paperwork. And the third argument clearly would be that some of those higher level professionals are going to be needed, especially in rural areas where there's not enough medical professionals available. They may end up being taken away from more important hospital or clinical work. So you see the pro and con arguments, again, not fact-checked. These are what you'll find if you look in the details of your sample ballot. Let's look at the money. Next slide. So again, it's very much the same players, I'll call them, as 2 years ago and 4 years ago. Putting this on the ballot is the Service Employees International Union, United Healthcare Workers West. They are the most funding to support it. They aren't putting much into it. And you might say, well, that's odd. They spent money to get it on the ballot and, don't they want to push for it? Well, I'll explain in a minute one reason that they may not be spending much more, although 7 million is a lot of money. And then on the opponents, paying for the no ads, DaVita and Fresenius and US Renal Care. So it's pretty clear cut. By the way, you can see the disparity in funding. I always say you might see about 6 or 7 times as many no ads as you will see yes. Simply look at the financial gap between the two sides. And these figures, by the way, may have changed somewhat since we put together the presentation, but it gives you a sense of the ratio between pro and con. And just for your information, a lot of people have said, so why is the healthcare union doing this over and over again? And they don't, so far they have been unsuccessful. We don't know if it'll change this time. And many observers, this is kind of the political science people, simply believe that it's a bargaining strategy, that the healthcare workers union, they would like to organize and unionize the clinical technicians, and they feel that by doing this, they are pressuring the for-profit corporations. And I can't say much more. That's a theory about why it has come back for a third time and why the union, once it gets it on the ballot, doesn't tend to invest too much in winning. Just getting it on the ballot is obviously creating an enormous financial pressure on the for-profit corporations to fight back. So there's some background on Prop 29. Again, if you are voting yes, you are saying you would like to see a higher level medical professional on duty in the clinics. If you vote no, you may be concerned about the higher level professional being unnecessary and maybe needed at another healthcare facility rather than watching technicians give treatment. So that is 29. Let's look at 30. Thank you. Prop 30 is also a little bit interesting. Let's talk about the basics. So this one is to create a change in taxation for a small segment of Californians. It would create an additional income tax on those who earn $2 million a year or more. And please note, this is earnings. This is not assets like a home you own or your retirement funds. This is money you are earning annually. So there's about 0.2% of Californians earn 2 million or more a year. So it's a tiny percent. And this would impose an additional tax of 1.75 on their income. And just for the record, that sector, that economic strata, already is paying about 13% state income tax. So it would take them to about 15% state income tax. Obviously nothing to do with federal income tax. And then how would this new tax income or revenue be used? Well, a total of about 80% would be about electrification of our vehicles, including charging stations, infrastructure throughout the state, and of course, subsidies and rebates and so on, so people can afford these expensive electric cars. And then 20% wildfire response and prevention. So let's look at our next slide. So obviously, if the people, even though there's very few of them, but the people who make 2 million a year or more, obviously, if they add that extra 1.75%, that's going to bring in some nice money, between 3.5 and 5 billion into our state budget. The part of it that would be dedicated to wildfire response might reduce costs to the local governments and or the state, because it would help pay for suppression, prevention, and so on. And of course, it could stimulate a part of the economy, which is our electric car market, and all the companies that build them and so on. Let's look at the next slide. So in favor, and again, we're going to look at money in a minute. Now we're just looking at what the two sides are saying. First of all, the obvious thing that it would push us much faster than we currently are into electric vehicles, would provide the resources for a lot more people to get them, and it would provide those stations all over so you can plug them in, which right now is quite a challenge for many people, finding a place to plug in, especially if you're driving up and down the state. There's some money for wildfire prevention. And obviously, if we leave our gas guzzlers behind or our gas powered vehicles and go into electric, it could definitely improve our air quality and therefore our health related to air quality, lung disease and heart disease and so on. Now, on the no side, this is where it gets into who brought this to us and why. So Lyft, the car share company, is funding this, and we're going to look at the numbers in a minute. And some of the no arguments are basically saying, hey, Lyft wants the wealthy taxpayers to cover the cost of upgrading their workforce, their drivers of the cars owned by the individual. Basically, Lyft wants rich people to pay for what they need to do. And by the way, they do have a mandate. The rideshare companies have a mandate to get, I think, some very high percent of their drivers into electric cars by 2030. So there is tremendous pressure on Lyft and Uber, but I should make clear, Uber is not involved in this. This is a Lyft sponsored proposition. And of course, there's the continual concern that if you tax and tax and tax the wealthy, they may simply leave. I do not believe there's a lot of data on that, but there's that kind of threat all the time when we raise taxes on our richest Californians. And then there's some concern that it doesn't clearly protect those who can barely afford a car, much less an electric car. So those are some of the arguments you would see in your sample ballot. Now let's look at the money. So, and I'm going to explain about some other prominent opponents that are not listed here. So again, as you can see, the primary funding to get it on the ballot, 2 million or so for signature gathering and the Yes campaign, is Lyft. The electrical workers, you can understand why they might like lots of work building charging stations. And then I don't really know who Zinc Collective is, but so you're looking at about 16 million on the yes side. Now the no side is not raising at the same rate. The three names you see are basically wealthy individuals. They're not household names. For whatever reason, they would like not to be taxed further, I guess. I'm assuming that's their motive. And by the way, another wealthy person who may or may not currently be a California resident, just recently there was a report that Jane Fonda, I'm sure people know who she is, came out and sort of said, shame on those millionaires who are fighting this law. This is about health and the environment. And she made a statement. Now, let me say one other thing. On the no side is a very interesting and well-known individual. And I don't know how many of you have seen this, but there are some ads. Our Governor Newsom, who traditionally is very much in favor of environmental protection, he is coming out against this. Along with him are the two major teachers unions, California Teacher Association, California Federation of Teachers. Now you might say, well, why would the governor and the teachers oppose? Well, it's about that issue of money for education. Because if this passes, the taxes on the very wealthy, the 2 million or more annual earners, but the money is locked up for the purposes of the electrification, the vehicles, and the wildfire. And the teachers are always worried about protecting education funding. So that's where their no position comes from. And again, when you see commercials or you get junk mail, you can see that the pro material or the pro advertising is always going to be an environmental group, a healthcare like lung association. It's all going to be about the environment. It won't mention lift. And on the no side, although they're not raising a whole lot of money, what you might see is, this could hurt education. This carves out a chunk of money that never can be used for education. So that gives you a sense of the background of Prop 30. Let's go to 31. Okay, 31 is a little different. It's a referendum, and I'm going to explain what that is if you don't remember it from high school, maybe. So what happened is a few years ago, our state legislature passed a law to ban and prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco in the state. And it was signed by the governor. However, it never went into effect because immediately after, a special interest group, and you will guess immediately which one, decided we don't want that law. Let's do a referendum. Let's gather signatures and let's see if we can persuade voters not to allow this new law to go into effect. So the law has been in limbo until the election is completed and the votes are counted. Referendum simply means the voters have the opportunity to repeal or undo a law passed by the legislative body. So let's go to the next slide. So to be very clear, if you vote yes, you would like the law to go into effect, and that would mean we would have a prohibition on the sale of flavored tobacco products in the state. If you vote no, you do not want the law to go into effect. You do not want prohibition on the sale of flavored tobacco products. And let's look at the arguments. Next slide. Oh, first, the fiscal impact. Here's the deal. If something is illegal, it doesn't get taxed and it isn't regulated and there's no safety insurance of the quality of the product. So, if this is made illegal, there could be some tax impact. That's kind of the primary potential fiscal impact. Let's look at the next slide. So again, our arguments for Prop 31, that the flavored tobaccos are apparently very popular with teenagers because their flavor, they're literally strawberry and peppermint, and I don't know much about it, but they're quite appealing. And of course, the concern is that you're creating a new generation of tobacco addicts because it feels like you're vaping or smoking strawberry, but it's tobacco and you can become addicted. And of course, this whole thing of it could make customers from people who might not use plain old tobacco. So it's very appealing to young people. And of course, obviously, if we have a new generation of tobacco addicts, whether it's flavored or not, that'll increase healthcare costs, and we all pay that one way or another. Even if we never touch the stuff, Medi-Cal will cover the people who need healthcare and so forth. And then arguments against are basically around sort of a more what you might call a libertarian approach. Adults should have a choice. Prohibition doesn't work. If we have illegal products, they'll still sell, but they won't be taxed and they won't be regulated. I mean, people who prefer the illegal, who prefer it legal, clearly have several arguments here. Again, repeating, if you want the law to go into effect, you vote yes. If you want there not to be a ban on flavored tobacco, you vote no. Let's look at the next slide. And here's where your guessing game pays off, because look at who's the no on 31. The tobacco industry, naturally. They desperately want to maintain a legal market for flavored tobacco. And they want to spend, or they are spending, probably by now more than $22 million to get you to vote no. On the yes side, you have a known individual who I don't know quite why he's investing that much in this particular thing, but whatever the reason, there it is. Kaiser Foundation Health Plan. And here you get the teachers supporting it. And their argument, which you can read in your sample ballot, is we don't want to see our young people getting addicted. I want to mention one other thing about Prop 31. If you live in the city of LA, the city of LA has already, by the city council and mayor, passed a prohibition on flavored tobacco. So starting January 1st of 2023, the city of LA has already made it illegal to sell this stuff starting January. So there's going to be that city, and there may be others that I'm not aware of, where they're doing it city by city. This, of course, would be statewide. So I think everyone understands what yes vote means and what a no vote means on 31. Now we're going to go to the more complicated ones. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, so here you go. I know everyone has been bombarded with advertising on both sides of both of these propositions. And I say both because 26 and 27 are really interconnected. And what I want to say right from the beginning is what we're dealing with in these two propositions are 5 special interest groups. We have the tribal casino, tribes that own casinos. There's also the non-tribal casino tribes. They don't own a casino. They're sometimes referred to as the underadvantaged or disadvantaged tribes. Those are 2 separate interest groups. Then we have the card rooms. We have the horse tracks, of which there are 4 horse racing tracks in California. And then we have the out-of-state online betting corporations. The 5 interest groups are battling it out in different configurations on these 2. So we're going to kind of break that down. But I want to be very clear. There's 5 special interests, all of which want your or somebody's gambling dollars. It's about their ability to get the profits and revenue from increased options for gambling. So right now, California does not allow sports betting. And when I say sports betting, just to be clear, people betting on a baseball team, the outcome of a football, game, etc. And until recently, this was prohibited all over the country, sports betting. The federal Supreme Court not long ago ruled that sports betting should be legal. It should be a legal option. And many states have already legalized sports betting, but we have not. And these propositions are part of the California method of making decisions, right? We have all these propositions. And so sports betting is a big part of this. Right now, there is gambling, a variety of forms in our lottery, of course, card rooms, horse tracks, and tribal casinos. Let's go to the next slide. So right now, or the proposal, I should say, would be to allow in-person sports betting at the horse race tracks and the tribal casinos. And it would also in some ways expand some of the games that are permitted at tribal casinos. And well, we'll explain more about the card rooms and impact on them. But this is what it would do. It would allow sports betting at essentially, there's about 60 tribal casinos and 4 horse race tracks. That's the only place you could do betting on sports events. So let's look at our next slide. Of course, the revenues from all this sports betting would mostly derive to the places that you do it, but some of it, of course, would come to a new fund, and it would essentially add revenue that could be used on a number of state priorities. Enforcement costs are unknown depending on how this is implemented. Let's look at the next. So here we go again, reminding you these arguments are not necessarily factual. They are the points of view of those who favor and those oppose. So in favor, there would be increased revenue for education, gambling addiction, mental health, all kinds of valid and legitimate programs. Again, helping support the spending on education and the argument you may see in the advertising is maybe also focused on tribal self-sufficiency, the gaming tribes, those that own casinos, expanding their economic base. Now against, this is where you get into some of the weeds on this. It has a clause that would expand the opportunity for private lawsuits against the card rooms in case they are letting people do the kind of gambling that they're not permitted to have. So there's some concern about some cost to the Department of Justice. That's the state. Regulatory costs, obviously, you will have to regulate. Again, will it be offset or not? You know, and then of course, it basically, quote, unfairly permits certain betting on games of chance and sports betting without allowing card rooms to benefit. So let's look at the money, and now we'll start sorting things out a bit. So Prop 26 was brought to you by predominantly the wealthy casino owning tribes. And there's 3 of them listed here, and there are many, many more who have collectively put in, as you see, over $118 million to say yes on 26. On the opposing side are mostly the card clubs, and Night Adventures, I believe, is one of the out-of-state companies that they want Prop 27. We'll explain in a minute. And I guess what you can see here is, and I just heard today, and we had been giving this number, on these 2 propositions between the yes and the no, money side, there is about $400 million being spent to either get you to vote yes or no on either 26 or 27. $400 million by these special interests. So it's kind of phenomenal to see the amounts of money being spent on us, the voters. So that's 26. Now we're going to look at 27, and we're going to kind of compare, because they're like mirror images in some ways. Oh, one other thing on 26, when you look at the arguments, you won't see, necessarily, all the tribes listed, although I think actually they do list themselves because they believe they have the credibility of being tribes that deserve revenue and self-sufficiency. But what you will see on the no side, you won't see the card rooms listed. And if you're seeing commercials on TV or getting junk mail, on the no side, what you may, for example, see is a police officer from Hawaiian Gardens, which is a city heavily dependent on tax revenue from they call it a casino, it's also called card room. And they'll be saying, our city government is going to collapse if our card room is inundated with lawsuits, which 26 would potentially create. So again, you're not going to see necessarily, and the other interesting no on 26, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals of Los Angeles. And you might say, now, why are they in the mix? It's because of those horse tracks. Because the SPCA, they oppose the horse racing because they believe there's cruelty to animals involved and danger to animals. And they would like to see the horse tracks kind of fizzle away, which they have been for demographic and other reasons. And they feel 26 will reinvigorate, because then people can go and do sports betting at a horse racing track. So again, you're getting a sense of where the money's coming from, but what voices are also speaking for yes and no. Let's look at 27. So right now, again, there is no sports betting and there is no online sports betting in California. There's simply no sports betting legally. Obviously, there may be people doing it, but it's not legal. Let's go on. So basically 27 is a bit of an opposite of 26. Instead of going to the Indian casino or the horse track to do sports betting, now pick up your cell phone and imagine yourself going to an app on your cell phone, mobile sports betting. I'm going to the app, I'm pretending, of course, and I'm going to start betting on my favorite baseball team. And I can do it anywhere I want except at a tribal casino or a horse track. Let's go to the next slide. You hear me kind of laughing because it's kind of amazingly interesting. So of course, there would be a new fund set up to cover the cost of regulation. And you might see the Yes on 27 ad saying, this is going to solve homelessness. This is going to give support for gambling addiction. We're going to actually give some money to the disadvantaged non-gaming Indian tribes. I mean, you're going to see a lot of yes stuff, and this sort of, hints at that. Let's look at the arguments. So again, in favor, this will create tons of revenue from this sports betting from your cell phone, anywhere you want to be except a casino or racetrack. And it will help the disadvantaged tribes, and it will make a legal regulated market, and theoretically only adults will be able to do it. That would be the pro side. On the no side, first of all, a big concern that gambling addiction is a problem already. A certain percent of people who go to the casinos or the card rooms do become addicted and can suffer some severe consequences. The experts fear that being able to do it from your cell phone could create even more addiction because it's so easy. And all you do is put in your credit card and off you go. And then, of course, the no side is making it clear who's behind this. We'll look at the money in a minute. It's out-of-state gambling corporations who will definitely profit if they can expand into California. And you notice 50 of our tribes oppose 27. So what we've got, again, 5 interest groups fighting over who gets the revenue from new forms of gambling, which interest group will benefit. And of course, if they both pass, I do want to say we're going to see endless courtroom battles over what the heck would happen next. Let's look at the money. Okay, so again, on the yes on 27, what we do see is substantial, well over 150 million spent by the out-of-state corporations that would essentially, profit off of your mobile betting. And that's who wants us to say yes. And against it, it's almost a mirror image of the casino tribes, of course, saying, well, we're going to spend a ton of money to get you to vote no, because we want you to do your sports betting at our casinos. So you get the picture here. If you vote yes, you would like to be able to have people presumably over 21. I'm not sure how you prove that, but theoretically you're over 21, pick up your cell phone and go bet. And if you oppose it, you would say no, and you wouldn't necessarily, well, if you oppose 27, you'd be saying, I do not want that form of gambling in California. And I mentioned if both pass, it'd probably go to the courts. If both fail, you can be guaranteed that various different or similar versions will come back to you in 2 years, guaranteed. Because the interest groups, if these are both defeated, they'll be back, just like the kidney dialysis is back. Okay, now those are our state propositions, and we're going to take just a few minutes. I believe maybe almost everybody here today is in LA County. Let's go to the LA County. There's only 2, and they'll only take a couple minutes, and then we have plenty of time for questions. So first of all, the county measures of LA were put on the ballot by the Board of Supervisors, not by signature gathering of voters. That's the first thing. And there's 2 of them. And by the way, people are saying, well, where's Measure B? And I'm so sorry, I don't have an answer. We may have voted on a B a few years ago and they didn't want to confuse us, or I don't really know why it goes from A to C, but let me explain. Let's start with Measure A, how it got there and why. So right now, this is the charter of LA County. We elect a sheriff every 4 years. And if there are problems of some nature, the recall election or a grand jury is pretty much the only way to yank out that sheriff before the end of the 4 years, when presumably we could elect a different sheriff. So that's the current situation. Let's look at what Measure A might do. So Measure A would allow, by a 4 out of 5 vote. Remember, our supervisors is a board of 5 people who represent 10 million LA County residents, and 4 out of the 5 could vote to remove a sheriff during the 4-year term. Now, it's not just for random reasons. There is a list of violations of his or her, someday maybe we'll have a female sheriff, dereliction of duty, and all kinds of other things. You can read that when you look at your local sample ballot for LA County. And it would be have to be 4 out of 5, a super majority, we call that. Now let's look at the points of view here. So in favor, and by the way, this was put on your ballot by 4 out of the 5 supervisors. One of them opposes it. I'll explain in a minute. So 4 of them said, we need to have the ability to remove a sheriff. Frankly, why now? Because our current sheriff and the county supervisors have had a lot of conflict. And I don't want to go into details. I assume most of you are reasonably informed of a number of circumstances where the board has asked the sheriff to come and testify and speak, and he said no, and all kinds of issues. So they finally said, we need to have the ability to remove a sheriff. It would give them this option, and it would give the board of supervisors a new power. Now, against this, and one supervisor is opposing it and made these arguments, it reallocates the public's power to vote out the sheriff or recall the sheriff and gives it to the supervisors. It could be misused, and potentially it could be expanded. We have a county district attorney. We have a county tax assessor. Maybe the supervisors want to be able to kick them all out someday. So those are the no arguments. So again, if you support this, you're supporting the 4 supervisors who think they need this power. And if you oppose it, you are saying, I don't want the supervisors to have that ability. And again, a reminder, we are right now also having an election for sheriff. There are the incumbent and another candidate, a challenger. And, depending on the outcome of that and of this, we'll see how it all plays out. So that's Measure A. I don't have much on the money side of it. I don't think there's huge dollars pouring in to this particular ballot measure. Let's go to Measure C, County Measure C. This is about marijuana. They might have chosen C for cannabis. Sometimes they do that. They pick the letter that fits the issue. So right now, just quick background. County of LA has 88 cities and some unincorporated areas, meaning under the control of the county, not part of a city. Examples would be Altadena, Marina del Rey, as just 2 examples, and a substantial amount up in the Santa Clarita and Lancaster areas. There's a lot of open space that is unincorporated. Right now, the county has not had the power to give any legal licenses to marijuana businesses in the unincorporated areas. And there are illegal businesses, growers and dispensaries, but there's no legalization process available. So let's look at the proposal. So basically, this would authorize the county board of supervisors to offer opportunities to become a legal cannabis enterprise in unincorporated areas. And they would therefore be taxed, they would be regulated, their products will have to pass inspection. There will be a little more sense of safety around what they're selling. Maybe many of you have heard that some of the illegal marijuana that's sold can be adulterated with other substances. So there could be some tax revenue. And let's look at the sort of next slide. So the arguments in favor, of course, is that this makes for a safer cannabis market. It regulates it. The tax rates are not too onerous. remember, the illegal current businesses don't pay taxes. All they do is worry about, I guess, getting arrested. But, you know, that if they were to be legalized, they would pay some taxes, and it would be done in a gradual manner. Because frankly, here in California, even though we have legalized marijuana, there's still a ton of many tons of illegal marijuana out there, because some of the illegal growers and sales people, dispensaries, they call it, they don't want to go legal because of taxes and regulation. And that leads us to the argument against, there will be very limited licensing permits. There will still be an illegal market, and that many of the illegal businesses don't really want to be bothered. They don't want to be legal. Apparently, they are not terribly concerned about being busted, and they may want to continue as non-legal operations. Again, I do not believe there's a lot of money on either side of this one. So this is the end of our measures. Let's look at our last slide, because it's some wonderful resources I just want to mention before we go to Q&A. So I want to mention that votersedge.org is so wonderful. You go to that website, and it'll be put, I think, it'll be put on your screen some other way, is in addition to this slide. You put your address into votersedge.org, and it will bring up your ballot. And the special part is this: it'll give you the pros and cons of all the measures that are on your ballot, including your city measures, your school district, community college district, so on, your water district, whatever is for your area. And it will give you information on the more, I shouldn't say obscure candidates, but the less publicized, like judges, where you may be able to see a bio and a statement by a judge candidate. So I really recommend votersedge.org, and you can tell friends all over California about that website. Very useful, targeted to wherever you live and vote. The Easy Voter Guide.org, provided by the League of Women Voters, is a very simple pro and con for the 7 state propositions, a great resource. LAvote.gov, that's County of LA, just general information, where you can vote, when you can vote. Website of our chapter, Greater Los Angeles League. Recommendations available from the State League of Women Voters, if you wish to look up our recommendations on only a select number of ballot measures. And Ballot Tracks is great. If you sign up for Ballot Tracks, your ballot, you'll get an email telling you when it's been sent. You'll get an email telling when they've gotten it back. And then there's my email in case anyone has a follow-up question. There it is. So we will leave this on the screen for the moment, and we're going to go to questions. There's a few of them already in there. And Dr. McTaggart, I think you were going to read the questions to me. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
And
correct.
we can leave this on the screen for a while. I can come back, but you probably are better off seeing the resources than me. Go ahead, please.
Yes, for Prop 30, Tara Sitzer has a question. Why does raising additional money that wasn't ever there before affect money slated for educational funding?
Okay, and just to reiterate, Prop 30 is the one put on by Lyft for a tax increase on the $2 million or more annual earners, and it is narrowly carved for the electric vehicle stuff and some wildfire money. And so the question, why would it affect education, is this, that, oh, hold on, my screen went away, so sorry. That the education community, for the most part, never likes carve-outs unless it's for them. So you notice, education community is all for Prop 28 because the 1% carve-out is for arts and music in public schools. But they don't like Prop 30 because a carve-out is not for them. So it's pretty much, the education community wanting to be very protective. I think that's my best answer on why the teacher groups and Governor Newsom are saying no on 30, And the environmental groups are all for it. And of course, LIFT is there funding it. So I hope that answers. Let's look at our next question.
Okay, Beth Rainin has a question. What if both Props 26 and 27 pass?
You're going to see years of litigation. You're going to see a knockdown drag out through the courts on, are there parts of one that can be put into effect without, harming the other? It would be quite chaotic, to be honest. And this is not unheard of course. We have in the past passed propositions that go directly into the courts, and years later, they're found to be invalid, constitutionally invalid. In this case, I don't think it's necessarily a constitutional issue, but it would be, I think, years and years of litigation. I am going to say something. I'm not trying to influence your vote, but the current polling is suggesting they both will fail. And that's why we actually know that the interest groups will already be plotting to come back in 2 years, maybe with slightly different versions, but that's a projection. Polling is not always accurate. I'm just telling you what, the inside story is. Do we have another question, Dr. McTaggart?
I think that's it. We had another person, Dennis, who asked the same question that you just answered. So Beth and Dennis had the same idea on that one. And I don't see any other.
Okay, well, you know
wait,
what?
Sorry, there might be one more.
Okay. I was going to say, I can also add some general information.
Sure, go ahead. I think these are more.
Oh, but go ahead. If there's a question, please go ahead.
Sure. I think these were more comments than questions from what I see here.
I do want to respond. I see a comment that I think is worth mentioning about Prop 30. It is true the Sierra Club is not in favor, and it's of course one of our largest environmental groups. However, in favor of 30 is the Coalition for Clean Air, the California League of Conservation Voters, the National Resource, I think NRDC might be in. And I want to explain about the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club is opposing 30 because the wildfire prevention piece of it, there is concern that in the fine print that the wildfire prevention may have some harmful practices for the forests. That's why the Sierra Club opposes Prop 30, but they're not spending a lot of money and coming out against it very big. And there are definitely some very well-known environmental groups who do favor Prop 30. So I wanted to respond because it's an important comment. The Sierra Club is one of our leading environmental groups, and they're not on it.
We have one more, Mona. I'm just going to combine two questions.
Sure.
We have from Carol Sussman and Gwendolyn Flynn. Hi, Gwen. Regarding Prop 29. So I think there is some that Carol and Gwendolyn wanted some clarification regarding 29. Do you know of any instances when diabetes patients have been in danger because there was no high-ranking health professional on site at the clinics?
Okay. And that's really important. And I know it's a very tough one because this is about life or death, right? So it's really a hard one for a lot of us. According to, and again, I'm looking at your big sample ballot from the state. The clinics currently have a requirement to report infections and other problems, not only to the state Department of Health, but to the federal. And so they already have a pretty high regulation and accountability standard. And for what I have seen here, and I'm looking now at the legislative analysts, not the arguments yes and no, but from our state legislative analysts, which is a nonpartisan assessment of the circumstances and the details. And they're saying that basically they already have quality assurance training. Federal guidelines do expect there to be a doctor there part-time, not full-time, but about a quarter of a full-time position, a doctor does have to be there. And my understanding is there is not any kind of current outrageous, huge example or many examples of serious problems in those clinics. Now, if you're going to listen to the yes side, they will certainly tell you there are dangers to patients. And I don't believe any of us today, unless someone in our audience is a dialysis physician or something like that, probably none of us know the details around that kind of question. There does not appear to be any lack of regulation. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
You know, if we have a few, forgive me, I popped into the questions. County Measure A, I will be happy to explain which supervisors support and which oppose. That's a fact. It's not a partisan statement about any of them. The supervisors who support Measure A, which gives that ability to basically fire the sheriff for cause after a hearing. I mean, there's a procedure. We're not saying, you know, one day to the next he's gone. It's a whole process. The four who support it are Janice Hahn, Hilda Solis, Holly Mitchell, and Sheila Kuehl. And the supervisor who opposes it is Catherine Barger. So that's the story with the Measure A. And again, a good source to learn more about candidates is your votersedge.org. What happens is this: our league, state and local leagues, work very hard so that every candidate, including judges, including city council and so on, is listed in votersedge.org, so that the ones you can't find out much about, you can go and see if they have posted a little biography and some top priorities and who supports them. And they have the option to put quite a bit of information. We don't always get all of them to respond, but you will find many do. And something you can do on Voters Edge, let's say you're looking, I'm giving an example, the Sierra Madre City Council, and you see that there's a candidate who has not answered the question. You can click and you will automatically email that candidate saying, hey, I'm trying to learn more about you on Voters Edge. Would you respond? And I want you to know I did that recently, and the candidate responded immediately and said, oh, I've been meaning to do it. Thank you. I'm going to put all my information. So it's a wonderful resource. I do want to mention, while we have a few minutes, about the judges. I'm not going to comment on candidates. I want to tell you a little bit about the process and why we have, you'll see on your ballot, you will have a group of judges that you can only vote yes or no on. These are the state Supreme Court and the appeals court justices. The reason it's a yes or no is because under California Constitution, for those judges who serve 12-year terms and then need to renew, we are the confirmation. We, the voters, say yes or no. We don't have an opponent. On the county superior court, and of course, every county has a different number of openings in their superior court. We in LA County at the moment have 6 seats in which there are competitive races. And so when you get to that part of your ballot, you'll see 2 candidates, and whoever gets the majority will become a judge in LA County Superior Court. And I wanted to mention that because people often are very confused. Why can I only vote yes or no? That's because our state constitution made it that way. And then on the Superior Court level, there can be a competitive election. So I just thought I'd clarify that if that is something some of you have wondered about. And Dr. McTaggart, do we see more questions?
I don't see any more questions, but you are getting a lot of praise for this presentation, for being very excellent and informative, and lots of thank yous.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear it. Before I turn it back over to Marlene from Skirball, I just want to tell all of you that the League of Women Voters, again, we're open to everybody. We encourage you to learn more and get involved. I want to thank everybody who's here, especially our League of Women Voters friends and colleagues, and a number of people from all over. Now, Skirball wants to know if we're going to do City of LA. Well, we could. I certainly would be happy to. We do have time. So those of you who live in the city of LA, we are going to cover the 3 measures. Let's do it. Let's do it. We have time. And Marlene from Skirball says, let's do it. Once again, one of our wonderful interns developed these slides. Let's go forward right away. So one of the 3 measures for City of LA voters is LH, and this is an authorization to build low-income housing. Let's move quickly. Go ahead. So just to be clear, authorizing public low affordable and low-income housing must be done by the local voters. That's in our state constitution. We can't build it unless we say we authorize it. I want to be very clear. Measure LH has no money. It doesn't build anything. It doesn't locate anything. It simply says the city can do it if and when they have the money and the places to do it. It would be 5,000 units in each council district over about I think at least a 10-year period. Let's go to the next slide. So again, the state constitution says we have to give authorization. We have done this before back in 2008. We're just about winding up that process. How many years later? 14. And then, you know, we are required by the state to provide a very large number of low-income units by 2029. That's a big, big stretch there. So that's some of the background for Measure LH. Let's look at the next slide. So basically, of course, if we authorize it and if it gets built, it would certainly help us deal with the lack of affordable housing and certainly hopefully get some of the unhoused folks into permanent stable housing. Let's go ahead. And basically no fiscal impact because it doesn't create money or take money. It just says we can build it if and when we have the resources. So it's simply a requirement of our state constitution. Let's go ahead. You will see again in your county sample ballot, pro and con. The pro is, of course, that it's the right thing to do, that we have to provide housing, we need publicly funded housing and so on. And no argument was submitted against it, which is interesting. That's so unusual. And of course, eventually it'll cost money. But right now we're just saying, if and when you get it together, you can build this. Let's go ahead to the next one. Oh, supporters and opponents. Again, you'll see this in your sample ballot. And because there's no money involved, nobody's too worried on the no side. So yes, for LH would be you'd like to give the city the option to build if and when they have the resources, and no would be you don't want to see it happen. Let's go to the next one. Okay, SP, Parks and Recreation. I don't know why it's SP. Not quite clear. The P I get, Parks. And this would be an increased property tax for parks, recreation centers. It would be a parcel tax added onto property tax bills. City of LA. Go ahead. There we go. And we have done this before, many years ago, 96. And that money is going to expire. That parcel tax had an ending date. This would create the new tax, and it would be city tax, and it would go specifically to parks and recreation. And like many of these targeted taxes, it would have a citizen oversight committee, ostensibly verifying that it's being spent correctly. I'm sorry I say ostensibly. There are questions about those committees, but they are supposed to make accountability. Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to read you this long list. It would do a lot of things if it is passed. It would increase your property tax. and it would be for parks and water cleanup and drinking fountains and removing dead trees in our parks and all kinds of, really, generally, we would all support the purpose here. But let's start looking at why not everybody agrees and why some people are dying for us to say yes. Again, no direct impact simply because a new tax funds it. It's not dipping into any other current revenue. Let's go forward. So again, in favor, of course, safe and clean parks, being safe places for kids, reducing potentially gang activity, accountability with a citizens oversight committee, very clear positive social good. And on the con side, of course, it's a tax increase. There are some concerns that some of this would be used for Olympics facilities rather than our normal parks. I'm not sure of the details there. That was a comment made by Councilman Buscaino when this was put on the ballot by the city. By the way, all of the city ones were put on there by the council. They did not come. Oh, I take it back. 2 were council, 1 was signature gathering. LH and this one are the council, and the third one is a signature process. Anyway, you can see, let's look at who's for and against. Let's look at our list of supporters and opponents. Now, Mr. Buscaino supports it. Homeboy, Father Boyle, Carolyn Ramsey, LA Parks Foundation, the manager of the City Parks Department, and so on. Of course, on the con side, always the Howard Jarvis people are against virtually every new tax. Former Supervisor Antonovich, the Apartment Association, and interestingly, the LA Times editorial board. And I just want to comment because that one has puzzled a lot of people. The editorial board has said that Measure SP was put on in a hurry without public input, that it doesn't have some of the accountability measures it should. And their argument and their suggestion to vote no is let's send it back. In other words, if it's voted down, it will go back to the council. And by 2024, they can bring us an improved version. So I just wanted to explain that because people see that and say, that's unusual. The LA Times editorial board is often very supportive of these types of measures. So that's Measure SP. And let's look at our last one for City of LA. This one was put on by Signature Gathering, ULA. And this is really a tax increase regarding real estate sales. Let's go ahead and look at the details. So when people sell a property, there's a tiny transfer tax in the city of LA. It's about 0.5%. This measure, if it is passed, would increase the transfer tax for properties valued at 5 million or more. That would be commercial and residential, 5 million or more. And it would fund housing. It would fund construction, renovation, etc. So it's to create a special funding stream for a particular purpose. Let's look at the next. Right now, in order to build low income or affordable housing, it's quite a game, a process to put together the money. Developers have to hustle hard to get the resources to build affordable housing because there's just not going to be a whole lot of profit in it. Back in 2016, we did support a measure that was going to be to build housing and theoretically to help us end homelessness. It has not worked very well, in all honesty, that's a fact. All kinds of impediments, including neighborhood opposition to having the housing nearby, financial problems, a million reasons. And we still have tens of thousands of unhoused people in our city. Let's go on to the next. So basically, if this passes and it does what it says, it would increase our supply of affordable housing. we can move on. So again, if someone is selling a home or commercial property worth 5 million or more, it'll be a 4% transfer tax from 5 to 10 million, and then 5.5%, 10 million or more. And I do want to make it clear, there's a relatively small number of homes that are selling at that price level. We know there are those huge estates or mansions worth tens of millions. That's pretty small number. The 5 million and up it's not the majority by any means, even though we all see property values have escalated substantially, but it's still a fairly small number. It is in addition to the existing transfer tax, which, as you see, 0.56. So let's look at the next slide. So in favor, obviously, affordable housing, help for tenants who might be at risk of eviction and becoming homeless, low-income people. It will be protective of those who cannot afford to be housed in the current LA market. It won't just be to build new. It would be potentially to buy buildings, either commercial buildings that are vacant or other buildings that could be converted into housing. And again, only a small number of properties actually would be impacted based on the starting dollar amount. Against it, well, we did this. We tried to we taxed ourselves for Measure HHH, and there's some concern that it hasn't really fulfilled the promise. It applies to commercial and apartment buildings, which could translate to higher rents. There's administrative costs. Let's look at the entities who are, there you go. So there's, who you would expect favoring it: housing providers, homeless service providers, and so on. And on the no side, again, the usual suspects of the Howard Jarvis, Mr. Antonovich, and so on, and the Apartment Association. And you might say, why is Union Rescue Mission against it? They provide for the homeless, and I don't know. I am sorry, I can't answer that. I do want to mention briefly, because we're going to go to Marlene for final closing announcements. If you live in other cities, and I should have said this before all those people left, but City of Santa Monica has at least 6 or 7, maybe more ballot propositions. Culver City has 2. Many cities have these city measures. And again, that's why that votersedge.org is a great resource. You can get some information that is nonpartisan and objective about candidates and measures for your specific voting location. So I'm going to thank you all again. And Marlene, do you want to come on the screen and say some closing words? Thank you so much to everybody.
That was fantastic. Fantastic. Skirball extends gratitude to Mona Field, to Ninoshka McTaggart, to all of you for joining us. And thank you, League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles, for providing this wealth of information to voters. We do hope that this evening has added more trusty tools to your electoral toolkit as we sally forth into the last 3 weeks of the midterm elections. We do want to share with you that Skirball and the League of Women Voters will host a second event on the 2022 Ballot Measures, which will take place on our campus Sunday, November 6th from 10 a.m. to noon. This is during the weekend of early voting. Please share information about this event with other voters who you believe might benefit from joining us then. You can learn more about the event at skirball.org. Finally, I would like to share with the group that Skirball is deeply honored to serve once again as an LA County vote center for this electoral cycle, where you can vote in person or, of course, securely drop off your vote by mail ballot to an election county official. Thank you for your support of democracy. Have a safe and peaceful evening.